Hello, everyone. I'm Katie Ressler, Transformative Grief Guide, licensed counselor, and creator of the Legacy Growth Methodology and Certification Program. I am here with one of my besties, Angela Callahan, who's coming at us from Virginia in the United States. So we are going to be talking about in this series of videos how your clients are impacted by grief. And today, Angela and I are going to be exploring specifically her clients who are transgender. So Angela, what do you do? Where do you do it? And what clients do you typically serve nowadays?
Well, if you would ask me 5 years ago, the answer probably would have been different, but I work with trans, non-binary, and gender diverse individuals from about age 10 and up. I've been doing that work now for almost 10 years, which I can't even believe. I've been privileged to work in the field for 10 years, let alone in working with the wonderful clients that I get to work with. And I do see a variety of different types of clients, but most of my practice is geared towards working with people who are some identification other than cisgender or the gender that you were assigned at birth and feel that you are outside of those is the predominant who I work with.
Awesome. And where are you working right now? Because post-COVID,
yes,
not, but.
What a pivot that was. My practice is still in Hampton Roads in Portsmouth, Virginia. I still have my office and I still go to my office, which I think is a very nice balance between work and home. I have a commute and it's not just up and down stairs, but all of my clients are being seen via telehealth right now and have been since March 2020. I was also pregnant during that time period, which was a very interesting kind of conundrum to have to pivot in a variety of ways. And so speaking of grief, there's been kind of some grief to have to go through in that process as well. But I see everyone right now via telehealth, exploring options to have kind of a hybrid model practice. But I've actually enjoyed telehealth. I get to be a little bit more myself and comfortable, I think, in that type of practice. And I know that a lot of my colleagues are also kind of shifting because they realize that the service delivery is still top notch. We may have technology issues, but it really has expanded the access to care that I think so many people really desired, needed, and we need to continue with that. And because of the populations that I tend to work with, I've had clients in Southwest Virginia that I've been able to see. I've had clients in Central Virginia, and even clients who normally wouldn't have gone to see a counselor because of maybe some social anxiety and getting out of their houses. And so they can receive services now where they might not have been comfortable leaving their houses before, especially a lot of my trans clients. So it's been really, really great, kind of silver lining to all of the chaos that was happening so early on.
I agree with you. I'm even finding some of my clients, they'll be at work, they'll go in one of the phone rooms, meeting rooms, lock it up, reserve it, and then have sessions in there. And it gives them so much more flexibility with their day-to-day lives. So I think there's been a lot more benefits to therapy being able to switch to online and support people in that way. So I think it's beautiful you can do that. And like you said, to serve people throughout Virginia in a way you weren't able to before, and not limited to area. What are some of the key issues you're noticing your clients are coming in with the last year or two?
Oh gosh, the life that they used to have, and this is kind of across the board, not even just trans and non-binary clients, the life that they used to have, and the grief of having to get to know themselves in a different light, to get to know the world in a different light. Here in the States, we've had pretty significant political upheaval and, related to how we treat people of color, how we treat incarcerated people, how we treat women. And so a lot of it, we've kind of had to have more reckoning than I think maybe we've had over the past 25 years in a very concentrated format. And now that everybody has access to technology to see it all the time, it's kind of a bombardment on all of our senses. For my trans and non-binary clients, they've struggled with a lot of isolation. Many of them are younger. Many of them have IRL friends or in real life friends, but most of them have more virtual friends, people that they've never met in person before, but are considered their besties. They're, you know, the people that they count on and the people that they are most comfortable with. And I continue fielding kind of like, is it social anxiety? Is it gender dysphoria? Is it both, you know, and how they relate to their world? And now many of them are recognizing, like, I don't want to leave my house, where they had, you know, they had to before to go to various appointments in school and work and things. And some of them are now working from home solely. Some of them are not working and want to try to work, but they recognize it's very, very difficult for them. And you know, some of them have lost people in terms of, you know, to death. Some of them have just drifted away from friendships and relationships. And some of them have had to abandon relationships that were no longer conducive to safety, emotional safety, physical safety. And so often in this work, you know, I have the opportunity to work with parents whose children are coming out as trans or non-binary, and they want to support their kids, and they are still kind of grieving the loss of who their child was going to be. And that's, you know, that's like, I'm thinking like, well, what circumstances exist where their child couldn't still do the exact same things that they would have imagined, you know? There are very few circumstances where that would be the case, where they could no longer engage in, you know, whatever those goals and aspirations are. And it's also a difficult kind of thing in informing youth and adults. I don't get to see the parents in this regard, but to kind of say, let's look at the perspective your parents might be having right now. They have, quote, lost, you know, their daughter, let's say, because you're now a son. But they don't see you as their son. Maybe they want to, or maybe they don't want to. And that's, you know, those are different conversations. But trying to allow them to gain some of or that perspective, to be able to say, like, okay, so I still have to hold them accountable for the language and the pronouns that they use with me and the name that they use for me, if that is no longer what I go by. But I have to give them some space, or I have to allow them, you know, time to grieve. And that's hard, because I also have to remind them, you know, this is still about you. And you should always affirm yourself and validate yourself and what you're going through. And you should continue to say, when is enough enough? And if you need to make a different decision on whether you still engage with that person, those people, your family members, your friends, your loved ones. I mean, there's just so many people that are involved in everyone's lives. And they often, you know, say, like, I know they're not doing it in a malicious way. I know it's not intentional, but every time it just hits you right in the gut. And we know a disproportionate number of LGBTQ people experience homelessness or transitory lives because of family and friends not being accepting or supportive. We know more specifically trans and gender diverse people are at a very increased risk of suicide, very increased risk of substance use related disorders. And they struggle so much with stability in a variety of contexts: financial stability, housing stability, emotional stability. I do not work with a lot of folks who maybe have come from sex work for that purpose, but you know, there's so many different people that live amongst us in the world who deserve and need that support. And our communities are working on and improving access to care and improving awareness and support, but I think we have a long way to go on that.
Yeah. Well, in the beginning you were sharing about often they don't want to leave their homes.
Mhm.
And I was just thinking, well, yeah, because home is safe. They don't have to face the outside world and opinions and thoughts and the argument with family or friends about what pronoun to use or name to use. And I think it's good that you pointed out when working with your clients, it's about them putting themselves in the other people's shoes so that they can decide what boundaries to put, because like, okay, you probably are never going to get this.
Right.
So I need to create healthier boundaries.
And sometimes home isn't safe.
Right.
And yet they have nowhere else to go. We know that many more people who are already in unsafe situations became even more unsafe in those situations because they did not have the ability to leave. I've had one, actually, this person was not a client. We were doing a consult to determine whether or not this person would be eligible to attend the group that I run. And they lived in a situation where they were in a home with others who did not or were not related to them. This person was on some form of disability income, and so they were housed in kind of a group home scenario. And they were telling me, well, I can't be in my home to do virtual sessions. They have to be in person because my roommates like to listen in on my, and this person was an adult, like this wasn't a kid. So we have to understand the context of what our clients are dealing with in safety and confidentiality, which is not guaranteed if they're not in your office, so a lot of things that had to be determined and figured out related to how to still have the service delivery, but also mitigate the risks associated with telehealth. And I commend my clients in sticking with it. I had like a 50% drop off for my clients because, us pandemic babies, we were like, oh, 2 weeks, we'll be good. We'll just stay home and like everybody be okay. And we'll just go right back to normal. And 2.5 years later, here we are, so yeah, it was a lot to think through and consider. And some clients said, it's just not for me. And I said, I fully respect that. And other clients were like, let's do it. I gotta see you. So
yes, yeah, I found the same, that some were like, especially with couples therapy, no, we can't do this, and others were like, we have to, or things are not going to work in this home.
Right.
Well, so let's dive into the grief part of all of this, and you've already actually pointed out several areas where your clients and even therapists have had to experience grief. So for those of you watching or listening, when we talk about grief, we're not just looking at grief related to death. We are talking about hidden grief, which society doesn't usually see as something you should be grieving. It's related to adjustments and changes, health issues, identity issues, struggle with family members, relationships needing to end, separation, divorce, you name it. And so as we start to recognize that grief is actually a very natural, normal process in our lives, because we go through challenges throughout our whole lives, we start to understand that it's actually one of the greatest tools for our growth. So when we look at your clients, Angela, how are you seeing hidden grief really starting to bud in their lives? And how do you tend to address it with them?
Something as simple as a friend has ghosted me and I don't know how to deal with that. I don't know, like, do I communicate? Do I try to text them? Do I reach out? Do I just wait for them to get in touch with me? That especially related to so many folks having these virtual relationships with people, that is a terrifying scenario.
Yeah.
I can't tell you how many tears I have observed from people who are just like, what did I do? And then if the other person isn't communicative about like, hey, you hurt my feelings and here's how you hurt my feelings, they're just left to overthink. And that unfortunately for many of them just reinforces a lot of these patterns that they're, trying to break, but unfortunately get sucked back into really quickly. And it's so hard because then they're like, and then I also can't go out and make new friends, or that friend group, that Discord server, that whatever, they're all kind of connected. And so if they're ghosted by one, then there's the potential for them to be, shunned by more. Losses of relationships within the workplace. I've had several clients who've actually come out at work, or who have switched jobs and come out immediately at work in those situations. And so they haven't necessarily met people in person, or if they have, they haven't interacted in the same ways. And they're missing kind of a safety net almost of being able to work from home. If they don't have to, have themselves on a screen, they can still be relatively anonymous. And if, for example, they have a voice that is in a lower register because they might be a trans woman, voices don't change with hormone treatment. There is a very crazy surgery where they can snip vocal cords apparently and up the registers. And I'm just like, as a singer, I was like, no, ma'am, I'm not, no. But people will do things that they feel are going to be important. And I support them in that. And I'm also just like, but Julie Andrews had surgery and she can't sing anymore. I mean, it's just, yeah. So when you're on a screen and people can see you as your true authentic self, that's almost as if you were there in person.
Yeah.
If you're not sharing screens, or if you're not there in person, they don't have that same frame of reference. And so I have one client, she is, would be considered a trans elder at this point. So she's in her late 40s, early 50s. She's an executive at a tech kind of company. And she recently came out at work, probably within the past 9 months. But in coming out at work, much of their stuff is virtual, and she's still working at home like many people are. And she is less significantly affected by people who misgender her. But she also, it's kind of like a tick almost of just like, not again. And so we talk about, how do you call that person out? Do you say, hey, I know you probably didn't mean it this way. I know you couldn't see my screen, or you couldn't see my face, but you misgendered me there. And excuse me, she keeps it in stride. She's able to kind of say, like, I know it wasn't intentional. I speak with a lot of other clients and they're like, it doesn't matter whether it was intentional, it still hurt my feelings. And how to navigate that, because every single time that happens for a trans or non-binary person, it contributes to their experiences of trauma, or being triggered by previous situations where that might have occurred. And so it's just one of those things where we have to really be mindful with our clients, no matter who our clients identify as, how these little microaggressions occur, and how they, being their best advocate, can choose to confront. And also whether or not it's beneficial for them to confront. If you're walking down the street and somebody starts catcalling you and you're like, not about that, no matter what gender identity you have, you can choose not to respond and just go along with your day, but that's still something that kind of sticks with you. For trans people, they can be misgendered very significantly and very openly, and their safety might be at risk if they choose to confront in those ways. So that kind of scenario is more readily experienced, I think. And they do what they can, but a lot of them are just like, I can't do anymore. I just have to confront where I can.
Yeah. Well, this is all hidden grief. For me to authentically be myself, I will more than likely have to confront people the rest of my life. And the grief process around that, like, hey, I just want to be myself, and I don't want to have to argue or explain or teach or whatever it might be. And when that continues to come up, that is grief. Yeah, so I think, what I'm hearing is that the clients who are coming to see you, the topics that are bringing them into your office and the work that you're doing is hugely around hidden grief. So let's talk about, how do you find us as fellow clinicians? And I'll just ask, it's okay, I'm not a counselor in this moment, I'm just asking him, how do you feel clinicians, what are they lacking in their education around hidden grief versus grief just related to death when they're working with clients?
I feel like everything. I mean, I think that the most natural definition of grief is about loss of someone or an animal. It is a universal experience. We can't get through life without losing people that we care for and animals that we care for. And that, because it's universal, it's the most, recognized kind of form. But ending of any relationship, we dabbled in it, and in our program, marriage and family therapy, we were trying to save relationships, and ultimately you can't save everything. So we didn't navigate that as much as I now know we need to. Again, process of any transition, you go from working for 40 years to retirement. That is a significant life transition. My father-in-law is going to retire at the end of this year, and I'm just like ready for it, because it's going to be crazy. But it's, these things that we think of it, and grief doesn't have to be a sad thing. It doesn't have to be like I'm in the fetal position on the couch for weeks on end. That is one way, but it is not the only way. Grief can be wistfulness, grief can be appreciation, but also a mild sadness about something and how it changes. I don't like change. Many humans don't like change. And so anytime that something changes, like we're changing daycares with my youngest, I don't like it, but I recognize it had to happen because there was no other option. And so it makes me sad, because those relationships I will no longer have. I won't see those individuals and those staff members and have them greet us. And, and it's going to be a grief process, but is it going to be a significant grief process as when I lost my cat last fall? No. I don't have that same frame of reference. So we as clinicians need to understand it more. We as humans need to talk about it more. All those it's really interesting how in families, some families openly grieve, and some are just like, oh, well, that's done.
Right. Like
kind of like the Voldemort,
tough it up.
He who shall not be named. We don't talk about that anymore. And you're missing out on a really big healing journey there.
And I think as clinicians, we are taught about grief and the stages of grief, and we understand the history of how grief was studied, but we're taught to call things like this adjustment disorder.
We pathologize it.
Or in cognitive behavioral therapy, like, let's look at the cognitions and the behaviors that need to shift and change, instead of let's look at the core hidden grief that's been building up since probably childhood or your teen years. And when we heal that, when we work on that theme of issues, all of a sudden, that fear of failure and perfectionism isn't as strong, and you don't identify as that as much anymore. So it's things like this, I think, that I agree with you. It's something that I'd love to see clinicians and programs start to incorporate more, a better understanding of grief. And I think the last 3 years have taught us that it needs to come more to light. So Angela, how can people find you if they want to work with you?
Yes. Joke on my website is, email, phone, or carrier pigeon. My website is www.seekyourserenity.com. My practice is Seek Your Serenity Counseling Center. And doing this work, I'm so honored to be able to work with the clients I get to work with. I'm honored that I've networked with a lot of people now, and they know that I'm one of the people in this area. And I'm glad that we have more people who actually specialize in working with trans and gender diverse people. We need more. We absolutely need more. But that's the best way to get in touch with me. You can email me from my email on the website, and I'm happy if I can't see you, I'm happy to try to connect folks with great clinicians too. So.
Awesome. So our last question, what is the funniest moment you've had being a counselor? That you can share.
Yes. So this happened recently, and then it happened a couple years ago. Same client, but the client wasn't in session the second time. So I didn't know this, but in the before times, I was meeting with a client in my office, and she was sitting across from me on the couch. I was in a chair, and right behind me, it was like the corner of the wall. And I just see her eyes start tracking down this wall behind me. And she wasn't looking at me. She was looking like through me almost. And I just like, is everything okay? She's like, no, there's a spider behind you. And I was like, what? And so I, grab my tissues and I get rid of the spider. And I was like, are you afraid of spiders? She's like, yeah. So I felt so bad. Fast forward to just a couple of weeks ago, same client. We weren't in session yet, but I looked down and I'm just like on my phone, scrolling social media or something, and I see something just like crawl across the floor, and I couldn't see it because the carpet is dark and the thing was dark too. But I was like, something is moving over there, and I go over, and sure enough, it was another spider. And I'm like, so literally within a few minutes of this happening, I meet with her. She was my next client. And I was like, can I just tell you what just happened? She was like, it's only you, and I don't understand why. But she laughed, and she was like, I'm so glad I'm in my apartment. I'm like, me too. So you didn't have to deal with it. But there are probably others, but I try to have as good a time as possible in therapy and use humor. But that popped up just there.
I love the immersion therapy. Like, we're in it now. Spiders.
Right.
Let's talk about.
Now, my ladybug thing. If it had been a ladybug, I was going to leave. But
you would be the one who needs the therapy after the ladybug.
You're gonna have to close that chapter today. Yeah.
Well, thank you, Angela. Thank you for being my first one to interview on this series. And if you are a clinician, coach, or healer, and you're listening to this today, and you're like, you know what, I need to learn more about hidden grief, go to my website, katierustler.com, and click on certification to find out when the next certification program is going for the legacy growth methodology, where I teach you how to work on hidden grief in your client's life, no matter what work you do. Thank you again, Angela, and we'll see you all again soon.